So the concept that we're going to talk about in this video is one that's usually probably overlooked by candidates, and it's either ignored or not taken seriously. And that is probably the easiest question that your interviewer will ask you in an interview. And it's, do you have any questions for me? So, are you guys familiar with the serial position effect? Well, what the serial position effect is that means that human beings are more likely to remember something in the beginning, the first thing that occurs and the last thing that occurs. So when we look at the structure of the interview, the first one is the question, tell me about yourself, which we already go over in a 17-minute long in-depth video about how to answer one question. And the other thing is when you ask questions at the end. And that's why it's really important, because your interviewer may be on the edge about you as a candidate, and you can use this moment just by asking questions to really push them on the other side of the bar to give you a higher decision. So let's just talk about the things you shouldn't ask, and then what you should. In terms of shouldn't, I've heard some people ask about compensation, benefits, time off. Do not ask about any of those things. You really want to avoid kind of most topics that involve anything before you get the job, or things that aren't necessarily the best indicators of why you want to work there. And sometimes that's the perks. Some people might be like, oh, like it's nothing wrong asking about that. The thing is, you'd rather be safe than sorry, right? Because if you ask those questions to someone that does care about it, it's just not going to end well. So just avoid those topics, which is really anything about what you get in terms of like compensation. Another one is about like time off. That's another no. Anything that really makes you reflect in a negative light. Like, don't ask questions like, oh, is it okay I don't have a computer science major? Like, you just don't want to bring attention to negative things about yourself. And then lastly, anything that you can look up online or is very basic or common knowledge, you want to avoid. Because you ask a question that your interviewer might be like, oh, that's a dumb question, why would you ask that? That's going to go against you. So we want to avoid all of those things. What we want to do is we want to target questions that are going to elicit a positive response in our interviewer, or a positive response, or questions that are going to help you further down the line. So what do I mean by that? Well, eliciting a positive emotion. So people never really remember what you say. They remember how you make them feel. So if your interviewer walks away like feeling great because you guys just had a great 10-minute conversation at the end because of the questions you asked, that's going to help you get over that bar if you're on a borderline hire decision. So we want to ask those types of questions. And other types of questions we want to ask are anything that really benefit you. So if this is your first round interview, like ask them things about company culture, things about what they were like working there, anything that you could incorporate possibly in your interview questions down the line. But the thing is, we want to focus on doing those in networking event and while we're networking. So the way I look at this question and my go-to question is always, so you've been working at this company a few years. What has been a day, moment, or project where you're just like, I have the greatest job in the world? And the reason I ask that question is because I want to elicit a positive response. When people are passionate about something, usually like the best thing that's happened on their job, they get really excited. They want to talk about it. They like talking about themselves, and that usually makes them feel good. And my whole goal with asking that question is I want them to feel good, and then when they walk away the interview, they look back at it and they remember those positive emotions I made them feel when I asked that question, and they then start to associate them with me. And that's really the whole goal. And some people might be thinking right now, that's ridiculous. Why would that happen? That doesn't work. The thing is, though, would you rather do that or just not ask any questions? Because the way I look at it is it can't really hurt me to do that. It can only help. So if I've ever been on that borderline as should they hire me or not, I'm trying to push that over the edge. Another great question is kind of anyone that makes them think. So a good one that a couple of my friends use is, let's look into your future. Look into the year. Let's look into the future by a year, and you made the hire decision. What would that candidate have to do to really impress you and blow you out of the water? And I think that's a good question because it really sets kind of expectations on what type of person you want to be, because you want to be that candidate. And it's also good because you now kind of know the responsibilities that person is looking at the job that you could incorporate in future interviews. So again, hopefully you don't overlook the importance of asking questions at the end, and you really put thought and plan out the questions that you want to ask your interviewer.